cell site location data. None of that is part of the metadata. The metadata is simply the phone number itself, the length of the call, the time at which it took place, and of course the recipient's phone number too, as well as trunk information, which would be related to the phone number itself. But so when you talk about, it's difficult to analogize that to mail that we would send through the postal service, because we're not talking about the content of these phone calls at all. We're only talking about essentially their packaging. Essentially, we're talking about the outside of the envelope, if you want to go at that analogy, and say, when I write out, let me put it this way. If I were to write on the outside of an envelope that I want to kill someone, and I put that in the mail, I have absolutely no expectation. I can't have any expectation that every postal worker whose hands it passed through isn't going to see it. Or, I could never argue, oh, you're not allowed to take notice of this because it's mail, right? Of course, that's ridiculous. It's not it's not a private activity that we're talking about, and that's the key function, the key holding of the judge's decision this week on the metadata program was this isn't private information at all. It's non-private, and precedent requires that the lower courts uphold those programs. That was why Judge Leon's decision 2 weeks ago was so astonishing, because he says, "Oh, sure, Smith v. Maryland, I see this case. I'm going to ignore it." Which is one of those things that district courts kind of do at their own risk. They are technically bound by precedent, which is why one of the reasons I think that decision is likely to be overturned. I mean, the Supreme Court can overturn its own precedent if it chooses, but having a district court come along and say, "Nah, sorry, I'm sick of you," I think that's probably not going to fly very far.
It may not fly very far, but the Supreme Court has, at least some judges on the Supreme Court, such as Justice Sotomayor, has indicated that the court needs to change its approach, especially considering the digital age. I mean, if I take a piece of paper, if I'm writing Gabriel Mailer a letter via mail, it's protected. If I'm sending you an email, it's suddenly not protected. Or if I send you a text message, it's suddenly not protected. Justice Sotomayor wrote in a recent case at the Supreme Court, Jones, I don't remember I just remember it was Jones. She said it may be necessary to reconsider the premise that an individual has no reasonable expectation of privacy in information voluntarily disclosed to third parties. This approach is ill-suited to the digital age, in which people reveal a great deal of information about themselves to third parties in the course of carrying out mundane tasks, such as emails, such as text messages. She said, "I would not assume that all information voluntarily disclosed to some member of the public for a limited purpose is, for that reason alone, disentitled to Fourth Amendment protection." I think she nailed it. I mean, it's not very rare that I agree with Justice Sotomayor, but she nailed it.
Out, right?
Yeah, no, that's the great thing about it. I mean, that's the funny thing about it, is that Scalia and others, presumably, and I don't want to jump the gun here and criticize them in advance, but on civil liberties cases, they've generally been bad. I mean, but it's the liberal bloc, the leftist bloc, that has been good on the civil liberties issues, with the exception of the First Amendment.
Well, Scalia is actually really strong on the Fourth Amendment issues. In fact, he sided with Justice Sotomayor in the Jones decision. He's one of the concurring opinions in that case, suggesting that perhaps there needs to be a change. But again, what they're pointing out is a situation where you're pretending that non-private activity is entitled to privacy, which is something I hate. It's something I very strongly disagree with, I disagree with most, which Justice Sotomayor writes. And it's because, again, there's a fundamental difference between me sending you a letter that is in a sealed envelope and me sending you an email, because an email isn't sealed. Essentially, it's the example of where I was writing on the outside of my envelope that I gave to the Postal Service. That's what an email is. It's a completely public message that I'm handing to third parties. In fact, I couldn't even tell you how many third parties I've handed it to. It's got to go to my email. Google's got it because I'm a Gmail user. My ISP's got it. The people who own the architecture of the infrastructure of the internet that crosses from me to you. Then your ISP's got to get it, and then whoever your email provider, they've got these are all third parties with complete unfettered access to this information, and we want to pretend, however, that they don't. And that's
I don't disagree with the premise of what you're saying, in that this information is owned by it's delivered through a third party gateway. I understand that, and I get that. It's not that I disagree with that. What I'm saying is that information should be treated as private, just the same as a letter through the mail should be treated as private. The fact that this is no different than the concept of general warrants that we saw during the colonial era. This is the reason we have the Fourth Amendment, is to prevent this type of, as James Otis called it, the worst kind of instance of arbitrary power. The government does not need, the NSA does not need this information for any purpose other than to have more power. I mean, the White House Review Group specifically said that the metadata program, there is no evidence that the metadata program has prevented or thwarted any terrorist plots.
Okay, that's not what the review group said. The review group said that at least on a few occasions, and then they went on, more often negative results have helped alleviate concerns. Because there's two purposes here. One is to prevent attacks. The other is to build intelligence data on our enemies. And in fact, Judge Leon in his decision completely dismissed that second one and ignored it and said, oh, see, you can't point to any attacks we foiled, so we're done. And then when the government tried to bring up and said, oh, we're also mapping terrorist networks with this, he said, that doesn't matter. We're supposed to be trying to thwart attacks. Like, he literally threw out and dismissed one of the government justifications for this program. And it's important that we don't minimize it. The NSA believes that at least on a few occasions it worked, it thwarted possible terrorist attacks, and on other occasions it has allowed them to map terrorist networks. Intelligence gathering is a bona fide government activity, particularly in the case of terrorists. This whole program, by the way, started, I don't know if you guys were reading the fine print on the Section 215 program. The whole reason it got people's attention was because one of the 9/11 conspirators had been making phone calls back to Yemen before the attack, and we intercepted them on the Yemen side. But because we didn't have any way of looking at the phone metadata, we didn't realize that he was in the United States at the time of his telephone call. He was living in San Diego, and we didn't know it at the time. That's the whole reason it was created, was because, we might actually be able to figure out some of these things, map these terrorist networks before bad things happen. And that's a legitimate government function.
I don't disagree that it's a legitimate government function, but here's what the notable paragraph out of the review group report says. This is, our review suggests the information contributed to terrorist investigations by the use of Section 215 telephony metadata was not essential to preventing terrorist attacks and could have readily have been obtained in timely manner using conventional Section 215 orders. That is the intent of Congress, that it's done through FISA warrants on specific people, not a blanket general warrant for the entire American public.
And if I'm not mistaken, weren't some of the complaints in the 9/11 report the fact that the CIA and the FBI didn't work together on this, and if they had, they could have done something?
Yeah, that was
they weren't allowed to work together at the time. There was the Chinese wall between, the firewall between them.
Jamie Kirkich, I think her name was. Yes. She talked about the wall between the FBI and CIA, right?
Too bad it's not. Too bad it's not a. What's the best way to put it? A Tom Clancy novel, where CIA and FBI actually gets along really well. May Tom Clancy rest in peace. In the chat, Paris Paramus says Maller's voice actually sounds normal. Is that one of your ace friends, Gabriel?
I think it is. I'm not sure what the comment is in reference to, but yeah, my voice sounds normal today.
We do try to be substantive, and we also try to have a little fun at the same time. We are going to take a really quick break, and then we will be right back. This is Saturday Night Cigar Lounge, discussing the NSA with Gabriel Maller from Ace of Spades and Jason Pye from United Liberty. We'll be back right after this.
We want to welcome Michael Moore to Occupy Wall Street. I'm so impressed by what I'm seeing here.
How much of people's income do you, Michael Moore, want the government to confiscate?
Probably twice what we're paying right now.
It's not envy, it's war.
Where's the rage? Where's the uprising?
Storm the doors of the New York Stock Exchange.
It is a class war.
If the wealthy paid their fair share. For a documentary filmmaker, I do really well. I'm very blessed.
And the rich thought poverty was bad.
I do well.
They get rid of it.
What pure? There's nothing pure about capitalism.
And they know what's coming on Wall Street.
We're seeing the end of capitalism. And I say good riddance.
He is one of my favorite capitalists. Yeah, I want to give him a hug.
This is the Pint-Sized Pundit, and I am here to tell you that anything Taylor says on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge is his opinion and his opinion only. He does not speak for his employer, his employer's employer, or anyone else. He especially doesn't speak for Liz unless she says so.
Back here on Saturday Night Cigar Lounge, here on Vigilant Liberty Radio. Taylor here with Gabriel, I'm going to say it wrong. I keep wanting to say Gabriel Giffords for some reason. I'm sorry for insulting you, Gabriel.
Oh my God.
I was doing some research in earlier today on some language change that was being done, that the left was doing when it came to gun control, and I was tracking back something, and the language change started right around the time that Gabrielle Giffords got shot. So I've had her on the brain today for some reason. So my apologies, Gabriel Maller from Ace of Spades. Thanks for being here.
No problem.
Jason Pye from United Liberty, thank you for being here. Gabriel,
Thanks for having me.
Please do be willing to come back, even though I made that mistake.
That's like really ominous that you would make that connection.
It was an accident. Wait, which connection?
I'm just being silly.
It's been a long day, I think, for everybody, but Gabriel, you mentioned that you wanted to talk about the actual recommendation that the panels had. What in particular did you like about them? What in particular did you think weren't a good idea?
I think the one that surprised me the most was the one that directly concerns the question we're talking about today, the Section 215 metadata collection. And that was the idea that instead of the NSA holding on to that information, the metadata, just to have the phone companies hold on to it, and then they could come back kind of in the way that they've been doing it now. It's the way they're doing it now, it's a two-step program. They collect this data from the phone companies. It goes into a big vault of theirs, and then as needed, which there's an internal process. They have to get authorization and a whole bunch of other things and show a need. Then they can examine some of this metadata. Their idea now is, well, okay, let's have the idea of the recommendation, the panel recommendation is that, well, let's just have the phone companies keep all the data, and then we'll just come to them when we need to do our usual, what used to be their internal search process. Now we'll just come to them and then get it from them then, which it was almost, to me, I wasn't even sure I liked that better than the way it works now. I mean, it's an interesting idea. They're saying, well, look, if the phone companies already have this data, let them just keep it longer, and then we'll just come to them. I mean, I don't know if it was a kind of a formalist. I suppose the idea would be to, at least we trust our phone companies if we don't trust the NSA. I don't know. It was an interesting decision. I couldn't tell if it was almost form. I mean, Jason, what do you think about that? Is that better?
I mean, I think it's a step in the right direction. I'm hesitant to say it's better. I can't remember what the statute is now. I recall it being 5 years that they had to keep data on file.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's going to be long. I think the suggestion, or at least what I've read, there was an article in Wired magazine. I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, but it said that they may be required to keep it longer now. If they're in the way I read the recommendation was it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. Now, I may have misread it, but that's what I remember. And basically, on a Section 215 order, it would have to be to specific people as opposed to just mass collection of data, which the ACLU praised that recommendation. So But I'm still a little kind of cautious depending on how long phone companies are going to be required to hold on to records. But I mean,
and it should be noted that those phone companies are saying, we're not going to do it.